Welcome back, everyone. This is Goku-san DBZ. Welcome back for part 2 of my countdown of my personal top 100 favorite games of all time from Nintendo. So with that said, enjoy the retro wave music shows in the background. Last time was 100 to 76, and this time we are looking at 75 to 51. And I will also mention specific console that I played this game on predominantly in my preferred method of playing. So with that said, first up coming in at number 75, released for the Nintendo DS, so it would get a remaster or re-release on the Switch. I personally state this is the definitive way of playing this game, is on the Nintendo DS. Coming at number 75 is from Square Enix, the game that is The World Ends With You, a somewhat criminally underrated RPG in my opinion, a very unique RPG unlike many others out there from Square, really when it comes to a whole, because I can't really think of many other RPGs or games of this nature, honestly, really from Square. As the most part, though, I would say, obviously, games like, I would say some of the earlier, like, Persona games were a somewhat influence on the game overall. That's just my own perspective. Coming in at 74, released for the Super Nintendo, this is arguably my personal favorite racing game on the Super Nintendo. Most people go with, obviously, Super Mario Kart. For me, when I think of a fun racing game on the Super Nintendo, there is only one game I always think of: F-Zero for the Super Nintendo. F-Zero is an interesting series that personally I have pretty good nostalgic memories for the original on Super Nintendo, and some memory of also the Nintendo 64 game, though I never had that much experience, unfortunately, with the GameCube game, which is held in very high regard as Sega was the one who developed it. But with that said, indeed. Next, coming at number 73, is a game that I have played on two platforms. The first, the original, I played on the Nintendo 64. Coming in at number 73 is, originally, as I said, on the N64. At 73 is The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Yes, it does have nostalgia for me, and it was pretty much my second favorite Zelda game until the 6th console generation, that is. But I know a lot of people regard this as the greatest Zelda game. Don't get me wrong, it's a great Zelda game. It's one of my favorites, but it's not like my top 3. For me, it's probably top 10, arguably easily. But, well, you'll see. But yeah, also though, I will say, I think the N64 version of the game, however, is the definitive way of playing it, because they fixed a lot of major issues, and I actually think it plays really good. Also, if you get a chance, you can also get, of course, digitally on the 3DS as well. So, I do highly recommend, though, checking it out. And with that said, coming at 72 may be somewhat controversial, not sure, but one spot above at 72 goes to another member of the Legend of Zelda family. Next, coming at 72, which I have only played, well, actually, yes. This is a specific one, though. This is one of arguably my personal favorites that was exclusively released only on handheld. Coming at 72, and I think it's somewhat overlooked at times, exclusively for the 3DS for me at 72 is The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, which is a game I think more people actually need to give this game a chance. It is a lot of fun, the gameplay is great. I would say, looking back, now re-ranking some, I can definitely honestly say A Link Between Worlds is arguably in my top 10 favorite 3DS games of all time. And there's not even a bit of doubt about that. I will argue, though, I also hold the 3DS version of also Ocarina of Time up there also. Along with also, I personally like the 3DS version also of Majora's Mask personally a lot too. Coming in next at number 71, originally released for the original Nintendo. Though I did not play it that way, I played it instead on the NES Classic, and also I picked up a digital copy of it also on the Wii U Virtual Console. Coming at 71 is an all-time classic that is, I'm sure, anyone who knows old school Nintendo games knows this game quite well. At 71 for me is the original classic Punch-Out, which is definitely probably one of the, I would say arguably top 3 favorite boxing games of all time for me personally. It's between, I would say this, another game which I will be mentioning a little bit later on, a bit higher up, and the other one being Ready to Rumble Boxing on the Dreamcast. But with that said, next coming in at 70. Now, I have played this game only a little bit here and there. I played it briefly on the Switch. I have predominantly played this game though on the Wii U so far. So with that said, and I'm sure a lot of people have this probably a lot higher on their list, and that's fine. But with what I've enjoyed so far of the game, it makes it no higher than 70, though it still managed to end up higher than A Link Between Worlds or Ocarina of Time. So coming at 69, or at 70, is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Comes in 70. Not too much to talk about other than obviously it would heavily influence many open world games we see now. Obviously, a great amount of influence on games that I've really enjoyed, like Genshin Impact, which is a lot of fun actually. But overall, I think more people definitely Breath of the Wild does deserve the success it's gotten. I do feel it's a bit overrated, sort of like Ocarina of Time, though I dare say Ocarina of Time was still more revolutionary and important to, historically speaking, for gaming than what Breath of the Wild was. Breath of the Wild, the artistic stance and everything, definitely, I think, really helped bring something else to the open world aesthetic of Breath of the Wild, more so than many other open world games out there, which I do appreciate. But with that said, coming in at 69, this was released on the Nintendo 3DS. Coming at 69 is one of my personal favorite platformers, probably even top 3 favorite platformers on the 3DS, I dare say. Coming at 69 is New Super Mario Bros. 2 for the 3DS. Arguably one of my personal favorite Mario side-scrolling games of all time. I'm honestly surprised at how much fun I have had playing this game off and on over time. It's definitely great. I would say I have ended up having a little more fun with this than even the Mario game that was released on the Wii and stuff, though I enjoy that. I just end up finding more replayability, given though it's also on handheld, but I find it's a great game to play on the go, whether you're use mass transit, bus or something, or you're on a break or on lunch or something at work. It's a great game to play, and just to enjoy a little bit of that classic Mario and classic platforming. Well, truly an area where Nintendo has always been great in, which is platformers. That is, to me, the bread and butter of a lot of my love for Nintendo is from the platformers. And Mario games, definitely, and in my opinion, this is one of the best they've ever done for handheld, bar none. Coming in at 68, it's an interesting game. I was introduced to funny enough on the Switch port of the game. I haven't played on any other made by Rockstar games, and I'm not a big Rockstar person outside of maybe GTA 3 and Vice City on the PS2. This is really the first Rockstar game I've played in a long time I actually enjoyed, and I dare say I think I like this more than maybe those two GTA games I actually like. Coming at 68 is LA Nora, of course, based on stuff. This is more or less just a port from earlier consoles, but that's fine. I actually think it presently runs very well on the Switch, which I am very happy, and arguably was one thing I was worried about with the Switch port, because I have played a few multi-platform games on the Switch that haven't necessarily run the best, per se. At least two or three games that come in particular in my thoughts, one being MK11. This game, though, isn't nearly as demanding graphically speaking, but it supposedly does run very well for the most part. I actually like the storytelling aesthetic. I like the mystery and everything, the tone, earlier 20th century, and just everything. Now, this is something I would not mind seeing maybe a future game of from Rockstar. I would like to see them go more into stuff like LA Noire again, unless GTA or GTA in the Wild West, aka Red Dead Redemption. Coming in at 67, which is one of, in my opinion, one of the best reasons to have a Wii U, is for this game. 67 is the game called NES Remix Pack 1 and 2, which is a interesting new take and style and just elements just to make a classic game from the NES era more interesting, especially with classic Super Mario Bros. The fact you can play the game sort of like going backwards instead, and that's an interesting take. And I'd like to see actually Nintendo go back to this, well, which they did for the 3DS and the Wii U. Specifically, I'd like to see them do more of this for maybe the Switch, because I know there's people out there, not just me, that would love to see more of, I think, more future releases in the NES Remix. I just hope more people actually try this game out. If you have a Wii U, get this game before the Virtual Console goes down. Take advantage, trust me when I say this is more than worth your time. If you like classic Nintendo, this is a great twist to an old classic in my opinion. Coming in at 66. Released originally for the Nintendo 64. Also, of course, recently got a re-release of sorts, I guess you could say, for specifically re-releases on modern platforms, as well as physical re-releases on N64 and stuff. That being at number 66 is Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racing. As I've said before now, I love Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racing. This was by far my personal favorite racing game on the N64. Most people usually talk about like either the F-Zero game or Mario Kart 64 or Diddy Kong Racing, which is arguably better than the Mario Kart game. But for me personally, the pod racing game was always my personal favorite of this era of racing games on the N64. It was this, and then I would say Hydro Thunder. But for me, this game holds a real nostalgia for me, as I am somebody who has always loved the prequels, and I will always defend them no matter what. And pod racing is, I think, one of the best games we got out of, I think, definitely of games based on prequel movies. This is probably about the best, outside of also the Revenge of the Sith game. But with that said, coming in next at number 65 is a all-time classic. We're going back to the 16-bit war era. Back in the very late era of the Super Nintendo, this would be arguably become my favorite game involving, well, a certain monkey. Or rather, I guess you could say, Khan. Coming in at number 65 is Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo. It was the first I would ever play really of the series outside of the Donkey Kong arcade game, which this blows that out of the water. I know many people like Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 more. Personally, I still like the original more than the second or third game. If you do prefer the sequels, that's fine, to each their own. But for me, I always prefer the original classic, and I love the whole harken back and stuff, the very opening of the game, where you see Cranky Kong, uh, which I just appreciate that, honestly. The sense of humor, and keep in mind, this is back really when Rare was getting ready to hit its stride with, of course, working with Nintendo, as arguably many of the greatest games ever for the Super Nintendo or the N64 were Rare games, as they are arguably probably in my top 5 or top 10 favorite developers of all time. Speaking of, coming in at number 64 is a game that is hard to believe. Though this has gotten releases on other platforms, I specifically really like this as I can play so many of these classic 2D fighting games on the go anywhere you want with the Switch. And that is coming at 64, Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection. Not necessarily the pristine ultimate best way to play some of these games, specifically like Third Strike and stuff, but with the ability to play on the go, the fact that gives you multiple versions of Street Fighter 2, you have all three alpha games, you have all three Street Fighter 3 games, and you also have the original Street Fighter, which is still kind of crazy to think. But yes, I personally think this is a great collection, and this is actually some good to play on the go. I mean, it's awesome getting to play really any of the alpha games on the go is always a good thing. And in fact, this is about the only way you can play Street Fighter 3 on the go. Especially if you want to play Street Fighter 3 New Generation, or Street Fighter 2 Second Impact. This is pretty much the only way outside of Dreamcast, pretty much. Especially if you want it on the go, this is probably the best route. But with that said, coming in next at 63, released strictly on the Nintendo DS, though you can get it, I believe, on the Wii U Virtual Console eShop. For me, coming in at 63 is, I think, one of the best RPGs on the DS, bar none, and that is Golden Sun Dark Dawn. Arguably one of my top 5 favorite DS games of all time, easily. Though it's only been recent years I've really started getting into the DS, and I'm glad I finally did, as I only recently really started checking out the Golden Sun series, and you can get most of the Golden Sun, both the GBA games, are on the Virtual Console on the Wii U. So if you get a chance, pick them up. You only have about 1 month left with the Wii U eShop and, of course, the 3DS eShop. So take advantage as soon as you can. With that said, though, yes, I think if you haven't tried any of the Golden Sun games, give this game a shot while the prices are still reasonable before it gets expensive. Dark Dawn is great. I like the combat mechanics. I especially like the puzzles, and the dungeons are definitely a lot of the high points for me personally, and the sprite work is gorgeous. The music is great. Really, in general, in my opinion, Golden Sun series is probably one of the most underrated RPG series from Nintendo, bar none. Coming in at number 62, which is an interesting one, Pikmin 3. Yes, I've never actually played Pikmin 2. I know, I have played Pikmin 1, though it has been a very long time, as that was quite a few years ago I had Pikmin 1 for the original Nintendo GameCube. So, instead, I recently, since I saw it for Wii U very cheap, I was like, I'll pick it up, I'll give Pikmin 3 a shot, since it's way cheaper than getting the Switch version. So I did, and surprise, actually really enjoyed the game. I actually like the refined mechanics and overall gameplay of Pikmin 3. I would say by far it is easily my favorite, at least of the 2 Pikmin games I have personally played. But, as I say, to each their own. But yeah, it is a great game to play on the Wii U if you have one. I mean, the price is reasonable, and it's a great game. Also coming in next at 61 is for the Switch, and that, well, technically in 64, and it's a tie between these two. It's a tie between first the original N64 Super Smash Brothers for the N64, and it comes in tied with Smash Ultimate for the Switch. Tied at 61. Yes, I couldn't choose a favorite. The original Smash arguably has not necessarily aged the best, but I still like playing the game even with my dear Pikachu or my, of course, Star Fox. Star Fox McCloud. But anyways, nostalgia factor heavy. Ultimate has been fun, at least what I've played of it. Keep in mind, predominantly, I've mostly really been trying the game with specific DLC characters like Sephiroth, Kazuya. I'd still need to get around to actually trying out Sora. But I will say, out of the stuff, I've really had quite a bit of fun. And it is good, but still heavy nostalgia is why it ties. And it only gets a 61 because it's not exactly my favorite Smash games. Speaking, next coming in at 60 is I think one of the most underrated classic NES games. Coming at number 60 for me personally is Ice Climber. A genuinely classic NES game that you can get on the Virtual Console pretty cheap. And I think more people need to give this game a shot. Is it very simplistic and basic? Yes, as many games from this specific time period in the 80s. But still, sometimes there's just a certain something about even the simplicity in the gameplay that I really enjoy coming back time to time and replaying. It's the same thing as games like Galaga, Galaxian, Donkey Kong, or heck, games like Space Invaders, and many others. Well, and Pac-Man. But yeah, and that's what Ice Climber has. Charm. Coming in at 59, released on the Nintendo Switch, and I am glad how much I've enjoyed this game. Coming at 59 is Monster Hunter Rise. I would say in some areas, I actually think I like Rise more than Monster Hunter World, though I haven't played fully World, but from what I have played of World, I will say overall, I like certain mechanics and things, and the story, characters and stuff just more overall in Rise, just appeals to me more personally. And that's because I actually appreciate a little bit more single player content, as with World is more focused on multiplayer online functionality. Rise, not quite so much, and maybe that's why I like Rise a lot more. Not sure. Coming in at 58 is a tie between two great Resident Evil games, superb from the GameCube era. Tied at 58 is between Resident Evil Zero, a criminally underrated Resident Evil game that doesn't get enough love. Yes, I get the difficulties a lot higher, but that's one of the things I actually enjoyed about it. And it comes tied with Resident Evil Remake, which is the way you do a remake properly. This is an example for many other attempted remakes out there. This is how you do it correctly. You add a lot more to the actual environments, make it that much creepier. You add new ideas and new stuff that weren't in the original, but don't go too far off the path. Like the Crimson Heads was a great idea. Can be annoying at times, but still, I actually appreciate it. And definitely the more gothic atmosphere and tone to Resident Evil Remake, in my opinion, makes it the perfect pinnacle example of how a remake should be done correctly. Coming in at 57, also released on the GameCube. Now this was predominantly only sold for 3 specific games in the collection, a compilation. Coming at 57 is Sonic Gems Collection, though it is specifically known for 3 games that you get in it. You get, of course, obviously, Sonic R, Sonic Fighters, and of course, Sonic CD. And Sonic CD, for me alone, is one of the big enough reasons to get this collection for that game alone. Though Sonic R is also a nice little addition as well for me personally. But keep in mind, this come from a huge old school, or in general just a lover of Sonic, and going all the way back to the Sega Genesis. And I have followed and played Sonic for well over 2 decades. And I don't see myself ever ending. As long as there's some good quality, and I'm willing to give basically any Sonic game a chance. And this is I think, a great collection. Just know nowadays it's not quite as reasonable. It's cheaper actually on other platforms outside the GameCube. But if you're a GameCube collector, check it out. Coming in at 56, released for the Nintendo 64, another classic, which you can get in the Virtual Console, is Star Wars Rogue Squadron, which is a all-time classic, one of probably the best Star Wars games ever released with Nintendo, or on Nintendo platform. It remains exclusive. Rogue Squadron is a great game. For a long time, it was my favorite jet fighter type of game involving Star Wars, though Rogue Leader would end up surpassing it as my favorite, and I would also end up liking quite a bit Starfighter as well later on. But with that said, Rogue Squadron is still a great game to play on the N64 even to this day. I'm surprised overall. Graphically, yeah, it has obviously aged a lot, but I actually think it's still pretty fun and replayable. So, if you've never actually played it, I recommend giving it a shot, as the price is still very reasonable. Coming in at 55 is a great 2D fighting game that has been released on main consoles now, but you can get for a reasonable price on the Switch. Coming in at 55 is Skullgirls Second Encore. A great game, as it is, I think, one of the best modern day 2D fighting games with great classic art style. Very much kind of reminisce of things like Cuphead as well. Great indie game. A lot of love and passion put into the game. And I love just the jazz and blues music in the background and stuff that you would expect from like 1920s, 1930s like nightclubs and stuff, which I actually appreciate quite a bit, as I'm actually a bit of a big fan of jazz music, so I appreciate that quite a bit. Also, coming in at 54, a game that deserves a lot more love than it gets, released for the Nintendo Wii. I'm actually surprised at how good this game is. It's one of the only games I genuinely don't mind with motion controls from the Wii. Coming at 54 is Silent Hill Shattered Memories. I know, probably a bit of a surprise out of nowhere, but yes, I actually really like this game, and I will like it quite a bit on the Wii, as I've already seen in the past. Coming in at 53, released for the Nintendo DS, and it remains, if you want to play the actual whole game, still remains exclusively to the DS only. And that being Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days. I know, weird, some of these titles in Kingdom Hearts games. It's a great game that takes place between Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2. Around the same time frame is also Chain of Memories. Of course, revolves around the character of Roxas and revolves around Organization 13. It is I think, somewhat underrated of the side games, except among the hardcore Kingdom Hearts community, which there's some great Facebook groups for Kingdom Hearts fans I recommend. But with that said, coming in at 52, released originally for the N64, though it would get actually a limited run physical release on the Switch. Coming at 52, one of my all-time favorite first-person shooters, and that is Turok 2 Seeds of Evil. Comes in at number 52. Classic, love the multiplayer mode back on the N64. Arguably, it's one of those games I actually hold it up pretty high, on almost the same level as GoldenEye. That's how much I like Turok 2. I definitely like it over the original Turok. Personal preference, though. Coming at 51, and that's it for this for part 2, but coming in at 51, originally released on the Super Nintendo, is the all-time classic Super Metroid, which is arguably probably the greatest Metroid game of all time. Though I'm sure there's people out there that will argue Metroid Prime for the GameCube is the best. It really depends on your taste. Though I really, probably overall prefer that era, I still have a definite love and appreciation for classic 2D Metroid. I think original Super Metroid is great, though I also think people should check out Metroid Fusion, personally. Definitely a good one you can get on the Virtual Console. But yeah, that is it for this edition, and yeah, coming at 51 is Super Metroid, which more people need to give this game a chance, as some of the boss fights are very memorable, and definitely Ripley, all-time classic, of course, villain to fight. But with that said, I'll see y'all again soon enough. Same YouTube time, same YouTube channel. I'll see you again for part 3, 50 to 26.